Shabbat Shalom. Today is 17th of November 2018. 9 of Kislev. 5,779. Today we're going to read the portion number 8. The name of this portion is Vayetze. It's in the book of Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 28. And we are going to read from verse 10 to chapter 32, verse 2. And we're going to do this reading in 7 aliyot, or 7 readings, and 7 ascents, according to our custom. First aliyah, Yamot George Petty ben Abraham Abinu likro b'Torah.
Shabbat Shalom. Now Jacob went out from Beersheba and went towards Haran. So he came to a certain place and stayed there all night, because the sun had set, and he took one of the stones of the place and put it at his head, and lay down in that place to sleep. Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to heaven, and there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. Also your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and the east, to the north and the south, and in you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go. Will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid, and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Then Jacob rose early in the morning, and took the stone that he had put at his head, set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel. But the name of that city had been Luz previously. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and keep me in this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you.
Aliyah number 2. Yamot John McLean ben Abraham Abinu likro b'Torah.
So Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. And he looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks. A large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all the flocks would be gathered there, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. And Jacob said to them, My brethren, where are you from? And they said, We are from Haran. Then he said to them, Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. So he said to them, Is he well? And they said, He is well, and look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. Then he said, Look, it is still high day. It is not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go and feed them. But they said, We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together, and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then he watered the sheep. Then we water the sheep. Now while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father. Then it came to pass, when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him for a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall be your wages?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and appearance.
עלייה number 3, יעמוד על וויזין בין אברהם אבינו לקרוא בתורה.
Now Jacob loved Rachel so that he said, "I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter." And Laban said, "It's better that I give you to her than I should give her to another man, so stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, but they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her." And Laban gathered together all the men of the place, and they made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, older daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. And Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. He said to Laban, "What is this you've done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me?" And Laban said to him, "It must not be done so in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill a week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve me with still another 7 years." Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. So he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also. And Laban gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a maid. Then Jacob also went into Rachel, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Laban still another 7 years. When Adonai saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son. She called his name Reuben, for she said, "Adonai has surely looked on my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me." She conceived again, bore a son, and said, "Because Adonai has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also." And she called his same name Shimeon. She conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was Levi. And she conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now I will praise Adonai." Therefore she called his name Judah. And from there she stopped bearing. Now Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children. Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children or else I die." And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel. He said, "Am I in the place of God who has withheld you the fruit of the womb?" So she said, "Here's my maid, Bilhah. Go into her, and she'll bear a child on my knees, that I may also have children by her." So she gave him Bilhah, her maid, as wife, and Jacob went into her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son." So she called his name Dan. Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, "With great wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed." So she called his name Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob as wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, a troop comes. So she called his name Gad. Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. And Leah said, I'm happy, for the daughters will call me blessed. So she called his name Asher.
Amen. Bless you. Aliyah number 4. יעמוד Mike Burns בן אברהם אבינו לקרוא בתורה.
Now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, Please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, Therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, You must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah said, God has given me my wages, because I have given my maid to my husband. So she called his name Issachar. Then Leah conceived again, bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband would dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun. Afterwards she bore a daughter, and called her name Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph, and said, The Lord shall add to me another son. Oh, 27. I'm sorry. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, Send me away, that I may go to my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, and let me go. For you know my service which I have done for you. And Laban said to him, Please stay, if I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake.
Aliyah number 5. יעמוד Randy Epperson בן אברהם אבינו לקרוא בתורה.
Then he said, Name me your wages, and I will give it. So Jacob said to him, You know how I have served you, and how your livestock has been with me. For what you had before I came was little, and it has increased a great amount. Adonai has blessed you since my coming, and now when shall I also provide for my own house? So he said, What shall I give you? And Jacob said, You shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your flocks. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from there all the speckled and spotted sheep, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the goats. And these shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in the time to come. When the subject of my wages comes back before you, every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the lambs, will be considered stolen if it is with me. And Laban said, Oh, that it were according to your word. So he removed that day the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them into the hands of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar, and of the almond and chestnut trees, and peeled white strips in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he had peeled he set before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the streaked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. But he put his own flocks by themselves, and did not put them with Laban's flock. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous, and had large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has acquired all this wealth. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Then Adonai said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field to his flock, and said to them, I see your father's countenance, that is not favorable toward me as before. But the God of my father has been with me, and you know that with all my might I have served your father. Yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. And if he said thus, the streaked shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. And it happened at the time when the flocks conceived that I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and gray-spotted. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. And he said, Lift your eyes now and see. All the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked and speckled and gray-spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, Is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and completely consumed our money. For all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it.
Aliyah number 6. Yamot Chris Lemon ben Abraham Avinu לקרוא בתורה.
Then Jacob rose and set his sons and his wives on camels, and he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions which he had gained, his acquired livestock which he had gained in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob stole away unknown to Laban the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. So he fled with all that he had. He arose and crossed the river and headed toward the mountains of Gilead. And Laban was told on the 3rd day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the mountain of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said, Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. So Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountain, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, What have you done that you have stolen away unknown to me, and carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword? Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me, and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Then Jacob answered and said to Laban, Because I was afraid, for I said, Perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. With whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. in the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the two maids' tent, but he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, Let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me. And he searched, but did not find the household idols. Then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, What is my trespass? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? Although you have searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren, that your brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes, your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You acquired it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was in the day, the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac have been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night.
Aliyah number 7. Yamot Tony de Biase ben Abraham Abinu likro b'Torah.
And Laban answered and said to Jacob, These daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these my daughters, or to these their children, whom they have borne? Now, therefore, come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Then Jacob said to his brethren, Gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there on the heap. Laban said it Geiger Shadaduta, but Jacob called it Galilee. And Laban said, This heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore its name was called Galilee. Also Mizpah, because he said, May the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent from one another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives beside my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, Here is this heap, and here is this pillar, which I have placed between you and me. The heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of their father judged between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread and stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning, Laban rose, kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. Then Jacob saw them. He said, This is God's camp. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim.
reading of the מפטיר, יעמוד קווין הדריק בן אברהם אבינו לקרוא בתורה.
And early in the morning Laban arose, and kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. So Jacob went on his way, and the angel of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim.
ברוך אתה, אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר במבין טובין ורצה בדברי חן, הנאמרים באמת. ברוך אתה, אדוני, הבוחר בתורה, ובמשה עבדו, ובישראל עמו, ובנביאיהם האמת בצדק.
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, King of the universe, who chose good prophets and was pleased with their words, which they spoke in truth. Blessed are you, Adonai, who chose the Torah, Moses his servant, Israel his people, and the prophets of truth and righteousness. Jacob fled to the country of Syria. Israel served for a spouse, and for a wife he tended sheep. By a prophet Adonai brought Israel out of Egypt, and by a prophet he was preserved. Ephraim provoked him to anger most bitterly, and therefore his Lord will leave the guilt of his bloodshed upon him, and return his reproach upon him. When Ephraim spoke, trembling, he exalted himself in Israel, but when he offended through Baal worship, he died. Now they sin more and more, and have made for themselves molded images, idols of their silver according to their skill. All of it is the work of craftsmen. They say of them, "Let the men who sacrifice kiss the calves." Therefore they shall be like the morning cloud, and like the early dew that passes away, like chaff blown off from a threshing floor, and like smoke from a chimney. Yet I am Adonai your God, ever since the land of Egypt, and you shall know no God but me. For there is no Savior besides me. I knew you in the wilderness, in the land of great drought. When they had pasture, they were filled. They were filled, and their heart was exalted. Therefore they forgot me. So I will be to them like a lion, like a leopard by the road I will lurk. I will meet them like a bear deprived of her cubs. I will tear open their ribcage, and there I will devour them like a lion. The wild beast shall tear them. O Israel, you are destroyed, but your help is from me. I will be your king. Where is any other, that he may save you in all your cities? And your judges to whom you said, "Give me a king and princes." I gave you a king in my anger, and took him away in my wrath. The iniquity of Ephraim is bound up. His sin is stored up, and the sorrows of a woman in childbirth shall come upon him. He is an unwise son, for he should not stay long where children are born. I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. O death, I will be your plagues. O grave, I will be your destruction. Pity is hidden from my eyes. Though he is fruitful among his brethren, an east wind shall come. The wind of Adonai shall come up from the wilderness. Then his spring shall become dry, and his fountain shall be dried up. He shall plunder the treasury of every desirable prize. Samaria is held guilty, for she has rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword. Their infants shall be dashed in pieces, and their women with child ripped open. O Israel, return to Adonai your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity. Take words with you and return to Adonai. Say to him, "Take away all iniquity, receive us graciously. For we will offer the sacrifices of our lips. Assyria shall not save us. We will not ride on horses, nor will we say any more to the work of our hands, 'You are our gods.' For in you the fatherless finds mercy. I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned away from them. I will be like the dew to Israel. He shall grow like the lily and lengthen his roots like Lebanon. His branches shall spread. His beauty shall be like an olive tree, and his fragrance like Lebanon. Those who dwell under his shadow shall return. They shall be revived like grain, and shall grow like a vine. Their scent shall be like the wine of Lebanon. Ephraim shall say, what have I to do any more with idols? I have heard and observed him. I am like a green cypress tree. Your fruit is found in me. Who is wise? Let him understand these things. Who is prudent? Let him know them. For the ways of Adonai are right. The righteous walk in them, but transgressors stumble in them.
Reading of the Apostolic Scriptures, Yamot Carol Davis, Batzara Imenu Likro Babrit Adasha. ברוך אתה, אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו את דברי המשיח ישוע ואת דברי השליחיו. ברוך אתה, אדוני, נותן את דברי המשיח ישוע.
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, King of the universe, who gave to us the words of Messiah Yeshua and the words of his apostles. Blessed are you, Adonai, giver of the word of the Messiah Yeshua.
Amen. You're going to read from here?
I can read right here. Okay. First John 4. Okay. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit that does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and is now in the world. You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. They are of the world, therefore they speak as of the world, and the world hears them. We are of God. He who knows God hears us. He who is not of God does not hear us. But this we know, the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love. In this, the love of God was manifested toward us, that God has sent his only begotten Son into the world that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love has been perfected in us. By this we know that we abide in him, and he is in us, because he has given us of his Spirit, and we have seen and testify that the Father has sent his Son as Savior of the world. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him, and he in God. And we have known and believed that the love that God has for us, God is love. And he who abides in love abides in God, and God in him. Love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. But he who fears has not been made perfect in love. We love him because he first loved us. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he has not seen? And this commandment we have from him, that he who loves God must love his brother also.
Amen.
Well, the Parashah reading for this week is entitled what? And it means, and he went. This reading takes us into the life of Jacob. We've been through the life of Abraham, and we've been through the life of Isaac. And just like Genesis is the foundational book upon which everything else is built upon. So each of the patriarchs is important because they are foundational characters in God's redemptive story. There's Abraham, who lays a foundation of what? What would characterize Abraham? Faith. Abraham believed God. It was imputed unto him for righteousness. Okay. Then comes Isaac. Now he lays a foundational character trait of submission. We could actually say submissiveness / obedience. Okay? And then comes Jacob, who lays a foundational character of being totally dependent on God. We might call that God's sufficiency. Jacob's life is so different from Abraham's life or Isaac's life. Abraham was the pioneer. He traveled a lot, planted the seeds of faith and obedience and faithfulness, and passed them on to his son. He was tested 10 traditional times, culminating with the sacrifice of Isaac. Isaac was tested along with Abraham when he was bound on the altar by his father. Isaac's bride was brought to him and simply given to him. He inherited all of his wealth, never left the promised land, lived a quiet life of plenty. Isaac lived 5 years longer than Abraham, 33 years longer than Jacob, and yet his life seems to be, would you say, less important to the history of redemption? His father and his son get a name change, but Isaac doesn't. We could say that the God of Isaac perhaps would be the God of the average person. He's very important in continuing the godly line. That's important. That's important to see throughout Genesis. Isaac's great contribution in his life was that which God worked into his life, a life of submissiveness. In his testing, he submits to his father in being bound upon the altar. He begins his life, in a sense, presenting his body to God, which is demonstrated in presenting his body to his Father. He teaches us the need to submit ourselves to our Heavenly Father and to be submissive in the kingdom of God. Of course, Yeshua is the perfect example, but we also see this character trait in all of the three patriarchs: humility, meekness, submission. These are the ground in which all of the other traits are developed and matured. Perhaps this is why Isaac lived such a peaceful, and we might even say uneventful life. O Lord, please allow me an uneventful life. Even as Paul writes to the congregation at Ephesus, he says, be submissive to one another in the fear of the Lord. It's a command. I can't overemphasize the importance of these three character traits: humility, meekness, submissiveness, and of course, we could add obedience. Perhaps submissiveness and obedience are the outworking of being humble and meek. So, what does submission to God look like? Submission to God, other than nice sounding spiritual words. What does it look like? How would you define it? And of course, it's putting God first. It's putting God first. Obedience to His commandments. Well, as we've seen, and I want to emphasize it more, Jacob's life was very different. He has to work 14 years for his 2 wives. Still, he had nothing but his family. And so he has to work 6 more years for his wealth. He encounters numerous tests in a foreign country. He's living with his conniving father-in-law, who takes advantage of him a lot, uses him, changes his wages continually. For 20 years, life is a continual challenge. Jacob says of his father-in-law in Genesis 31, now, I was with you 20 years. Your ox and your she-goats have not failed to bear, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. I did not bring to you the mangled. I replaced it. From my hand you extracted it, that stolen by day and that stolen by night. I was there by day. The heat consumed me, and the cold by night. And my sleep fled from my eyes. He apparently spent a lot of sleepless nights. He struggled against overwhelming odds. He obeyed his father and left. And he has to wait 20 years for God to tell him to return to the land. He has to trust this God every single day, all along his difficult way. In this process, he's laying aside his self-sufficiency and learning how to live in God's sufficiency. He will have to trust this God with his brother and the encounter that he will have with him. He will mourn for his beloved Rachel, whereas Isaac is not bereaved of his loved ones. But Jacob loses his beloved Rachel and believes that he has lost his beloved son Joseph as well. Jacob's life is characterized perhaps by the word struggle that far outweighs that of his father and his grandfather. But the real issue is it's not the struggles of Jacob's life, but the faithfulness of Jacob's God. However, the character issue is so important, isn't it? He bargains for the birthright. He deceives for the blessing. He works hard for his 2 wives, and he works hard yet more for his wealth. Seems to be a hard and difficult life, but God is faithful. God is faithfully working in him and changing his life. It happens over time. It's always a process. God is always in charge of the process. He finally ends up not self-sufficient, not depending on his own strength and on his own mental abilities, but he's now developing into God's sufficient. In the process of time, God works his change within him. You know, God's more concerned with his character than he is with what he's going through. That seems a little harsh, doesn't it? Life is a test, and life can be tough. But God is more concerned with who you are and who you are becoming than what actually you're going through. Can we say that? He works with what you go through in order to produce who you are in Messiah. We can make things a lot worse for ourselves than they really need to be. And I think that this is really where the struggle is. We can spend all of our productive years learning basic lessons of life and character over and over and over again. For Jacob, it doesn't mean that he was worse than his father. Doesn't mean that he was worse than his grandfather. Doesn't mean that God was beating him up, or even that it was God's discipline. Could have been simply the result of Jacob's calling. This is the way it was with Shaul, with Paul, 2 Corinthians 11, and they are they ministers of Messiah? I speak as beside myself. I am more, Paul says. I've been in labors more abundantly, in stripes above measure, in prisons more, in deaths many times. 5 times from the Jews I received 40 stripes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I've spent a night and a day out in the sea. I've been in travels often, in dangers from waters, in dangers from robbers, in dangers from my race, in dangers from the heathen, in dangers in the city, in the dangers in the wilderness, in dangers of the sea, in dangers of among false brethren. I've been in hardship and toil, often in watchings, in hunger and thirst, often in fastings, cold and nakedness, besides the things outside pressing against me daily, which are the care of the congregations. When he says, besides the things outside pressing against me daily, he meant these things are like a rush of a mob against me. The care of all the churches is more accurately translated as the anxiety for all of the congregations pressed in upon me every single day. Whenever we think we have had a rough week, we got to stop and contemplate an average week in the life of the Apostle Paul. Whenever we think we have had a rough week, stop and put it in perspective. You see, 11 of these occurrences are not even related to us in the book of Acts. For a moment here, Paul he takes us into his private life. We get a glimpse of his heart. We get a glimpse of who he is. We get a glimpse of the faithfulness of God in the life of his servant. And oftentimes we find lists of different things in Scripture, and it's a Hebraic thing to put the worst last. Paul had a shepherd's heart and was concerned and involved in the congregations that he founded and shepherded. His calling is critical in the ongoing history of the redemption, just as Jacob's calling is critical in the ongoing history of redemption. Character is formed with the building blocks of life. And God is putting the building blocks together in our life. And he is the master builder. Jacob needed to come to the end of himself. And many of us do as well. The master learned obedience through the things he suffered. Why not us? Jacob was thrust into the big, messy challenge called life. And your will needs to be broken in order to be conformed to his will. Because the two don't exist together. To come to the end is really coming to the beginning. It is something painful, but it is the only way. The proud self must be broken and made inoperable. The stubborn must be bent. The proud self might look like a lot of different things. I'm thinking of just skipping this part. Now I have this battle going on in my mind. Oh, it could be like a person who always justifies himself, or a person who wants his own way, or a person who stands up for his own rights, or a person who seeks his own piece of the glory. A person who thinks it's always someone else's fault. A person who tries to live the life of Messiah in his own strength and in his own resources. Perhaps a person who is hard and unyielding in his attitude towards others. Or it could be one who is self-conscious and thinking mostly of himself. Don't we all? A lot of times it's saying and being self-critical, angry, worried, controlling, demanding, or hosts of other ways that self-energy, self-sufficiency, self-complacency, self-pity, self-seeking, self-indulgence, or self-defense resides. Like Jacob, we have to come to the end of ourselves. Pulling away from the different expressions of this proud, hard self is both his work and our work. God's faithful. He'll show you. You don't have to beat yourself to pieces. You really don't. Just listen to His sweet, calm, gentle voice. Your part is recognizing His work and being submissive to what He's doing in your life. Yeshua was broken for us, and that is our all-encompassing desire to be broken too. He was broken to take away the penalty of our pride and of our sin. He was broken to take away the power of our pride and our sin. And He works through His Spirit that indwells us. He Himself is our place of encounter with God. We see Him in the very essence of God, not grasping at it or attempting to hang on to it, but letting it go for us, coming to this earth in the form of a man. More accurately, taking the form of a servant among men. We see Him willing to have no rights, no place to call His own, willing to let men revile Him, and He doesn't defend Himself. We have to come to the end of ourselves to find ourselves. We have to come to the end of ourselves to find intimacy with God. Each of us has our own personal spiritual journey. Each of us must simply respond, though, in what? Humility. Just respond to the humility of the conviction of God. We tend to want to leap ahead when there's a few things way back there that need to be taken care of, or there is something within us that needs to be dealt with. And so life is a process of maturing. How many grow old but not mature? See, one key to our understanding of the history of redemption is a twofold fact that Satan tries to destroy the seed of the woman. And when he cannot destroy the seed of the woman, he tries to corrupt the seed of the woman. There is this outside issue to calculate in the process of our maturing. And we see this important principle from the very beginning. For we see the ungodly line of Cain and the godly line of Seth. And we don't underestimate this principle. These two lines will continue until they are mixed. That mixing of the godly line with the ungodly line creates a huge problem. The corrupting of the godly line. The longevity of man and the corruption of man. His sinful nature results in a huge judgment of the flood. And then we see the godly line forming again in the first family of God. One is chosen, Isaac, and the other Ishmael, the father of the Arabs, or not. And again, one is chosen Jacob, and the other Esau, father of the Edomites, is not. And then, with this one that we are speaking about today, all 12 sons are chosen to form the godly line here on this earth. No wonder he was going through so much. He then chooses Judah to be a strategic player in his purposes. The promise of redemption in the beginning begins to unfold and begins to develop. All along the way, though, the adversary is at work. Don't take him for granted. The more strategic a person is in God's plan, the more serious will be the attacks of Satan. Faith, submission, God's sufficiency, all of the basic character traits that God desires to work within you. As he turns the working of Satan around into the working of God. As God turns the working of Satan into the working of God in the ongoing march of redemption. See, you're not the last person on earth. You pass it on. You pass it on. And they become God's work in the ongoing march of redemption. Faith, submission, God's sufficiency produces faithfulness to God's ongoing work, which He is accomplishing day by day in your life.